IB12, this is Mr. McGee, and we're going to graph our assignment here for carbon dioxide concentrations over Earth's history. First thing we're going to want to do is create a nice looking table. Then we're going to attempt to create a graph out of this, and we are using Google Sheets. A reminder that normally I advise you to use Microsoft Excel. In fact, if you have access to Excel, I would strongly urge you guys to use that instead of Google Sheets. It has a lot better features for when we do graphing later in the year. But it is what it is right now for virtual learning. If you have Microsoft Excel, you can go on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/atomicteacher, and you can look up carbon dioxide concentrations. The video was made about 2 years ago. So for the rest of us that have Chromebooks and we have to rely on Google Sheets, this is pretty much as good as it gets. So I'm going to kind of guide you through this as quick as I can, and just make sure you can replicate this on your assignment. First thing, notice that I put some data here on a table, and this is what you're going to be getting. It looks pretty terrible. Well, that's because I want you to clean it up and see how to use these features here. So what you're going to do is, first we're going to kind of space these out here just like this, make it nice and neat, and you can see if I click in between the C and D, I can space this out a little bit nicer here, and I'm going to space these ones out here maybe a tad bit wider as well, but I'll leave that to your preference. If you see what we have to start with, it's periods of time. So we go from the Cambrian all the way to the modern era, and this is MYA, millions of years ago, at 541 all the way to 0 years ago. And this is the mean atmospheric concentration in carbon dioxide. Now to graph these, we need to first figure out what is going to be our X and our Y axis. The truth is we can have two x-axes here. We could have either the years itself or we can use the period, but for this graph assignment, I'm going to have you use just the periods, and therefore we're just going to keep the years itself in our table. So what I'm going to have us do first is tidy this up and make it look nice. First, click in the MYA box and drag it all the way to the bottom corner, and we're going to come up to this box tool here and put a nice little box over them like this. Then we're going to come up to the top and highlight the labels, and then we're going to go over here and add a little background color with this icon there. You may pick any color you want to, but please keep it professional. Do not pick some bright color like bright blue or violet or something. I prefer to just stick with gray or something. It looks nice when you print it out, and it just looks more professional all around. Then what we're going to do is kind of tidy the rest of this up here. Now there's a number of ways to do this. You can highlight just like this here, the entire section, and go over here to the alignment tool horizontally. You can click and align them horizontally like this. You can click to center them, which honestly is how I prefer it, but I will leave that to your discretion as long as you guys are making this look nice and neat when in its presentation. Okay? As it is right now, if we look, the table looks relatively presentable and much more straightforward. So now what we're going to do is attempt to make a graph. Make sure you're clicked off on a box somewhere off to the side. We're going to go up here to Insert Chart. And I'm going to move the chart off to the side just like this here. And double click there just so we can get our options back up. Now before we do this, ask yourself, would we make a bar graph or a scatter plot, and what is the reason for both? Well, if you remember, a scatter plot is what we use when we want to graph numerical data. So if we wanted to graph years like 600 million years ago to present, we would use a scatter plot. But if we're using categories in what we call categorical data, we would use a bar graph. So looking at our table over there, we are going to be using periods of time. This is categorical, and therefore we're going to make a bar graph out of this. If we were to make a second graph with millions of years ago, you would think that this is numerical and we should use a scatter plot, but if you look at it, we're actually categorizing the periods of time into clusters. So actually this could be graphed out as a bar graph instead of a categorical graph. But we're just going to do the bar graph here real quick. Or click off somewhere just because the computer can somewhat mess up. And now you'll go to your chart editor. So Google Sheets is pretty simple, but that's honestly what I don't like about it because it doesn't give you a chance to customize options. You'll notice here it says x-axis, series, and data range, 3 sections, and honestly, for the layperson, that's pretty confusing. What I like about Microsoft Excel is it says X and Y. You pick out what you want your X and Y axis to be. I do not know why Google makes it so complicated. But for our data range, don't just click here like this. You want to click in this little box here. I don't know why, but sometimes it's screwed up, and you want to clear out that C16 because the computer is assuming you're picking a cell down there. Now you're going to want to, once you clear that out, you're going to come up here and highlight your data, which is our y-axis, our atmospheric concentration. Make sure you do not select the title up there. And you click OK. You should have data already like this because we have it on our y-axis. So data range is our y-axis. I don't know why they don't label that. And now we're going to go to our x-axis and do the same thing. Make sure you clear anything out if it is in there. Now we're going to go and highlight our categories. Again, do not highlight the period. That is not part of our data set there. And there we go. We have our x and our y-axis. And you might think we're done, but not quite. Come over here to customize. Now we do have the x-axis labeled at the bottom because they are individually labeled, so we don't need to write periods or anything under here, but we could if we wanted to. But we do need to label our y-axis because that is not labeled. So come over here to Chart and Axis Titles, and you're going to click on this icon here, and you can pick out which axis you want to label. In this case, I'm going to do the vertical title, and I'm going to pick the title for it. Well, what do you label the y-axis? And the answer is it should be the same darn thing your table is. In this case, mean atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide. Make sure you put almost the exact same thing, and I've already typed it in before, so I don't have to type it again here. Okay, once you enter your text in there like this, again, make sure you have your unit of ppm. You can play around here with the size of the font if you wanted to, or the color, but again, please keep it professional in its appearance. Now you'll notice there are other options down here. You guys may feel free to play around with these, but we are not going to be using them for this lab. For this activity, we're just going to get you used to the idea and concept of graphing. So now we're going to go ahead and take our table and our graph and paste it into our document. So have your Google files open, and we're going to go ahead and copy the table. And to do that, you highlight the table, come up here to Edit and Copy. We're going to go to our Google Doc, and now we're going to go to Edit and Paste, but watch what happens here. When I paste, and I would rather you paste it unlinked because then it doesn't, well, it messes it up some other ways. Now watch what happens. I go to paste it like this, but it's in a table format, and it doesn't let me shrink it to my liking. It's just kind of stuck there at this size. You can paste it like that, but in my opinion, it kind of makes it a hassle to deal with. I have a secret. Go back to it like this, to the table, and if you click Escape on a PC, you'll get rid of those fuzzy blue lines around the selection, and you pull up a snipping tool like this. Now, Windows has a snipping tool labeled as such, but Macs have them as well, and I'm pretty sure you can get something similar on a Chromebook. But if you go to a snipping tool like this, come into the upper corner, and then just kind of come and crop it. Now, hopefully you guys are spending more time doing this than I am, because notice I cropped my edges off. But then you can go here and copy this as a picture, and then you come back to your Google Doc and you just paste it as a picture. Now, if you might notice, it's the same thing. It's a table, but it's a picture now, which means we can stretch it very easily. We can even center it very easily and do whatever we desire to get our table to fit. And you'll find that is very handy. You can even click on it like this and come over and add a border to it. I have to find out where my border tool is, but you can come in here and add a little border if you want to add some thickness to it or whatnot. And then you can just come in and click and add your titles. All right, as far as your graph goes, you just click on that here, come over to Edit, Copy, and you come underneath here just like this, and you can paste your graph just like this. Again, paste it unlinked, it makes it better. So if you resize it like this, you'll find you can get them all on the same page, but you do want to make it big enough, whoops, you want to make it big enough that you can actually read the writing. Every year when we get lab reports, I always get a student that turns in a lab that looks something kind of like this, and nobody can read that. Or worse yet, a student will turn in a graph that looks like this, where it's nice and big, but then they do this to it. They squish it. Or, probably worse yet, they take it and they turn in something that looks like this. So scaling is appropriate. Make sure that you have this nice in its appearance before you submit it. Otherwise, let me know if you guys need help, and I wish you good luck.